You're listening to the Myerson Line. Life cycles, bicycles, fast lines, and hot takes.
Welcome once again to the Myerson Line. I'm Adam Myerson. I'm here tonight with Alec Donahue. Welcome, Al.
Thank you.
I keep forgetting to introduce myself at the beginning of the show because I feel like I just have welcomed people in my living room. Like, why do I have to tell you who I am? But then I listen to other shows and realize even actually famous people introduce themselves. So I'm going to start doing that. But we are part of the Wide Angle Podium Network. That includes the Slow Ride podcast, Kids Don't Follow, Crosshairs Radio, and the Honest Bicycle program. If you like this show or any of those other shows, you can go to wideanglepodium.com and you can subscribe. You can send us money. Apparently I got my first subscription last week. So thank you for that. I am aware of who it is and I won't out you here. I don't want to shame you for letting people know that you actually gave us money, but thank you for the support. I think it's weird to get money for this because it's something we were just kind of doing for fun and my own satisfaction. But, it'd be nice to get a real microphone. And I don't know, maybe pay some people for their time for being guests. So anyway, again, wideanglepodium.com to donate if you like. And other than that, I think we'll get started. Al, this is going to be an interesting show. So thanks for coming on. I didn't give you much notice. We only book a couple days in advance.
That's fine. I'm available.
Yeah. I know where you live. Yeah. But I think this is going to be a very interesting show because we are such close friends and also coworkers, collaborators, boss/employee. Our relationship spans so many different things. And some of that, I'm going to have to pretend not to know you from time to time here because I really want to tell your story tonight. I want people to get to know you maybe the way that I know you. And I want to teach I think are remarkable about you, that people who maybe only know you as this amazing coach to so many successful athletes, maybe they don't know that you like to eat wild animal hearts boiled in weird stew. You're a character and I don't think people know. Maybe they really don't know you the way I know you. And I want to pull back some layers on that.
Yeah.
It can be really
you guys see if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Yeah. You guys see if that's the misconceptions people had. Yeah.
I know. Well, I have to protect the business. So, maybe if I thought there were things that weren't good, that weren't going to work for you, I would avoid those topics, but I don't.
It's always been an interesting relationship because I think there's some things that are oddly, seemingly, fundamentally in opposition between us, and I think we've had our conflict over the years, and we both like to argue, but it's like you said, I eat animal hearts, and you were a vegan for a really long time, but I think it's an opinion I appreciated, and it was something that it stretched my understanding of other people's opinions. So the conflict kind of draws me towards the relationship in a lot of ways, but also does create conflict in other aspects.
Yeah, I think we're diving right into the dynamic between the two of us and why we've forged this successful partnership that takes shape in different places. The power dynamic changes based on what it is that we're doing. And even though I own a business that you work for, I defer to you on so many things. I take advice from you, and I do not take advice from very many people. And I think that's actually significant that I'm, it's not that I don't respect many people, but it's another line that you cross where I'm actually going to defer to you and take advice from you or put you forward as an expert beyond my own knowledge and expertise. And that's why you're so valuable as a friend and for the business as well.
All right.
We are so far ahead. That's like 30. We should have gotten to that like in 30 minutes, but it's a good foundation. It lets people who are listening know why we're fond of each other, I think, and why our relationship works so well. So let's back up for a second and really tell people, like, who are you? If I'm going to describe you to people, you're a coach. So you're the senior associate coach for CycloSmart, along with Jacob Fetty, and we hate that title. We wish there was a better, more descriptive title, but you're very, very important to the business, and you've been with me for a long time. Business, wouldn't run the same way without you. You're also a successful bike racer. We were teammates on a professional team on NIRAC for a year. You spent one season as a pro on the road, and we were teammates that year, which is great. You are 1/3 of Jam Fund with Jeremy Powers and Mukunda Feldman. You've really solidified and carried on this thing in Northampton, or in the Hamptons, quote unquote, in the Valley, in the Pioneer Valley, that JD, Billy Dew, myself, and John Fry worked on for so long in the 90s. You guys have really taken it and really achieved the thing that we started with the Northampton Cycling Club, which has been great for me to watch. You're a homeowner. You're a boyfriend. I think of you as a foodie, as an adventure foodie, and I do think of that as really part of your character.
For better and worse.
You do, adventure eating. Yeah. Can we call it? Well, it's funny because it horrifies me, and I think it's awesome. Like, if you're going to eat meat, the way that you eat meat is more, let's say, more respectable. There's some soul in what you do when it comes to food and eating and your adventurousness. And I do, it sounds strange to respect it, because I don't really want to kill animals to eat them, but I find what you do interesting. So what am I leaving out? How do you identify yourself beyond those things?
I try to be
your Uncle Al. Let's talk about Uncle Al. You are Uncle Al, and that is a persona that you have in East Hampton with Jam Fund and Scott and Ellen and all the kids. Like, they refer to you as Uncle Al, huh?
Actually, I'm an actual uncle too, so I have a family.
I think let's talk. Yeah, what is it when they're calling you Uncle Al? Who's Uncle Al?
Just kind of. I'm often the discipline, and in some ways, the discipline kind of have to nag people to do certain things. So it's kind of like I'm the authority in the day-to-day in Jam, where I have a lot more interaction with everybody on the program and all the Devo kids, where you're like, you just have to keep them in line. Even like off the bike, there's so much, you can see that off the bike activities can really influence their progression as an athlete. And, that's very important, progressing as an athlete. But like, I think we've had plenty of people through the Jam program that, you haven't seen in the results, that we're just trying to make reasonable human beings. And, I think bike racing is just it's the kind of the boundaries that we can use to, like, instill work ethic and, kind of ethics in general, which is where it gets weird with professional racing, because those guys don't always have the best ethics. But what, my take on bike racing and kind of like being a hard worker and contributing to a community, I push that pretty hard with, everybody owes a lot before they get anything.
And when I think about that, like, did you happen to catch the Roy Nickman article on Cycling News, where he like almost verbatim put forward that same philosophy that you just did, and that we obviously share with CycloSmart and the way I am with the athletes on my team? This idea that, so he left cycling for a while after, he was a pro, and then he was running teams, and he left cycling altogether. And now he's got a kid who's a junior on the national team, and it's kind of sucked him back in, and he's running a junior team. And he basically said, we know not all these kids are going to turn pro, and we don't really care. We want to teach them how to be better people and gain some life skills and help them be successful in everything else that they do. It's like, I read it and I was like, we couldn't have said this better ourselves. It's the philosophy that we espouse as well. And it was really great to read it and get some private messages from him, kind of discussing that. And you've done the same thing with Jam Fund as well. Like, you want, I think too, from a sponsorship model, if some of those kids go through the program and they don't become successful bike racers, but they do go on to be successful at life, in business, whatever, those are the people that eventually come back and support your program as well. And not that that's like, it's not a motivation. You're not thinking about that when you're trying to make people's lives better, but the point there is that you're creating a community that goes beyond just people turning pro. You're turning out successful humans.
Yeah,
that has a lot of value.
So I think that's what, having people win races is, I definitely like that. And having people progress and perform definitely is rewarding, but seeing what they all do as far as the amount they're willing to help out our community and cycling, they do a lot of work, and it's a lot more work than you tend to see with athletes of that level. And I'm proud of that more than anything. It's always going to be hard work is what I value over results. So that, I think that's it's definitely, I don't think it's detrimental at any point, but there are, I make them run a crit series. They do a lot of work putting on the UCI weekend. The fundo is a lot of work. Every Monday night we're back on with NCC with the kids program, and it's a lot. And I ask a lot, and it's I think it's always. I remember Hyde was like, it's good to you want to get off the team, because that's I stop asking you to do stuff as much. It's part of it's you get off Jam so you don't have so many community or so many volunteer jobs that I ask you to do.
I mean, even the cross camp, they all come and work at the cross camp, whether it's coaching or just serving food. I think the example of Ellen, working the Jam Fund tent and just helping set the course up. Scott and Ellen are always out there doing course setup, and then Ellen wins the race. I just don't think there are very many athletes of her caliber who are still recognizing sort of where she can contribute back to the community that put her forward. And that's a real big testimonial to the program. I think that you're turning out people like Ellen, never mind riders like Ellen, but people like Ellen. And Scott as well. Scott Smith is a good example of a kid who has really come a long way in terms of who he is as a person and his maturity. And I feel it's a backhanded compliment.
He tries to dress like he's a bum. And it kind of puts off this there's an appearance of this kid probably doesn't do any work, and he helps him out with so much stuff.
He's incredible. Yeah, he's great. Yep, he's great, and he loves being helpful to other people and taking on a leadership role. And but he was essentially a kid when I met him, and so he's an adult now, and so seeing that difference has been good. I think let's see if we can. We talk all the time at Cycle Smart about, we don't measure our success as coaches or as a coaching company just on the success of our elite athletes. I think we all get a lot of satisfaction out of, a category 4 master who makes it to category 2. If you can take someone who's say 40 plus and new to cycling all the way up to category 2 level and help someone sort of change their life, that's immensely rewarding. But those stories don't get told. They're not, Cycling News doesn't cover that work. And so the stuff that really gets attention is obviously the success with the elite athletes. And so I know you have a lot of, just a lot of athletes that people aren't going to hear about, but the ones that people do hear about, it's an impressive list. And every now and then I look at the list and even I'm like, I can't believe that these athletes are all Cycle Smart clients. And then I can't believe that they all work with Al. Hyde, Stephen Hyde, and either current or former, Stephen Hyde, Jeremy Powers, Ellen Noble, Michael Dick. You're working with Mike Vandenham now, although he worked with Sean Adamson, who's also a CycloSmart coach for a long time and is now, as Sean steps back a little bit, he's working with you, and obviously Mike's come on as a coach for us. Scott Smith. I mean, will you help me out here?
Jack, I think Jack was probably the fastest rising, elite cross athlete this year. And like his 11th at nationals was kind of, and then that's one of the biggest rides out there.
That people might not notice. No one goes, oh, wow, look at that ride in 11th. But what Jack did to get 11th.
Where he was, like, where was Jack 2 years ago? Like, people still don't know who he is, but they will. It's gonna, like, he's going to do it. He's talented. He's got drive. He's
still working a full-time job.
I shipped him off to Belgium.
He was.
So he's living in Belgium now.
Yeah. But he got that 11th working a full-time job.
I really hope Scott and Jack push each other this year. I think those guys can be, I want them to catch up to the other guys in East Hampton. That's one of the things with a hotspot like this is, they get to ride with Jeremy and Hyde and Ellen. And, there's a lot of there's so much access to Jeremy that, or to both of them, that there's it's a lot of, the guy you want to take out is right there and helping you, get up to his level. And, it's a chasm between Powers and Jack and Scott. But, the great thing is Jeremy's like the door is open to, any information they need, anything, like any riding, I think, and that's where I think building communities for elite athletes is it's, remote coaching is fine, and there's something you can get from it, but there's a lot you can get from it. But there's, when you look at you look at Boulder, you look at, so many towns in Belgium where you can, like, the best guys ride together, best women ride together. That kind of environment is just so helpful for advancing the elite end of sport.
For sure. I think, like training groups, in particular, you see it, with, so many other, like Gwen Jorgensen and her triathlon group, her Wollongong, Australia triathlon group. I think there's like 25 of them. To work with that coach, you have to move there and be a part of this training group. And so they're all, you're training with your main competitors. And so that group pushes each other and they all get so much better. And I think you saw that with Jeremy and Hyde. You say there's a chasm between Jeremy and Jack and Scott, but Hyde bridged that gap. Hyde filled that, he jumped that chasm, and he might still be a step below Jeremy, but it shows that it's bridgeable.
Right. And so that's, I think,
Jeremy is.
The existence of Hyde does make it like, it is more motivating. Like, oh my God, like, a guy got closer to Jeremy. Like, he's the closest guy in the country, and he's like, he came from, the program. So they see that that progress is possible if they do the work. That's only possible because of, Jam and Jeremy being open with them and like actively encouraging them to, do everything they can to improve. I think that's that's what, you saw so much in cycling where people wouldn't tell anybody anything. And there was like, it's such a closed sport. And I think that's one of the huge problems with cross and why we never get better in Europe is that we've never had anybody that's had success come back and really like tell the next generation, like, oh, what did you learn? How did you learn? Like, we don't have any historical knowledge that passes on in an effective manner. It may have happened on like some small scale that I'm unaware of, but I don't, no one ever came to Northampton and was like, hey, Proctor was trying to do that, and is doing a good job with it. But you really need like, someone that's had, a lot of success in Europe pass that down so you can skip the first 5 years of mistakes that everybody makes and then quits.
Right.
And we never get past that phase. So it's like, there's a chance that we're starting to build that momentum with, and it's like at Worlds, we had half of the town was, in the USAC house. And it's like, so now like everybody can come back here and like, so we've had like, six to eight people that will be in town that race World Cups, and they can be like, hey, we should change the practice course. This is what we should do. This was what was really hard at that race for me. And they can, help each other, like figure things out, bike position, what to do for like a training session. And, we can all work together to actually have like that historical data. And so I think that's really important. And I think that's one of the big limiters in US cross progressing. One of the limiters.
Yeah. Well, I think it used to happen through the club system when I started racing in the 80s, the club system was still intact, and you learned what you learned through the old guys in your cycling club. And certainly that was limited, and it's a different era, and there's a lot of folk knowledge that got handed down. But there was that institutional hand-me-down, a little bit of osmosis, a little bit of legend. And I think with the deterioration of the club scene in the US is what kind of gave rise to the professional cycling coach. Someone had to fill that gap, and that's where private coaches started to fill that gap. But I love going back and looking at the roots of things and the foundation of things. And I think here it's a good example of, the beginning of the Northampton Cycling Club.
I'm sure, thinking back on it, Paul raced in Switzerland, and I'm sure he helped.
Paul Curley, yeah. Be clear with people, because not everybody. When you say Paul, I know who you're talking about, but let's go all the way back. I mean, for me, I know, okay. But we have a global audience. They don't know who Paul is, but I think New England did have a legacy, and that legacy it does go back to Paul Curley, and Paul Curley might point to his influence as well. But for us, the real root for us is Paul Curley going to Switzerland in the 80s, learning German, establishing roots in that city, spending 5 seasons over there. Mark and Frank McCormick coming up through the Mass Bay Road Club and learning everything from Paul Curley and Tom Stevens. And then me coming up in Brockton and joining Mass Bay Road Club and learning from Mark and Frank, and Paul being my second coach and the first coach that I ever paid. And then Paul getting me set up in Switzerland when I went to Europe. He set up John Page. Like, so many people went through Paul. And then, I end up in Northampton and decide I never want to go back to Eastern Mass. I want to stay in Northampton. Let's start a cycling club here. Let's create that club that doesn't exist anymore. And, Mass Bay Road Club is kind of the model. And so this is a point where, late 90s, I'm coaching Jeremy. He's still a junior. Eventually we convinced Jeremy to relocate to Northampton, but also like Kevin Monahan was one of the first people that we got to move here. And so having like the professional national crit champion basing himself out of Northampton, all of a sudden it started to attract people. And even though I eventually left, at this point, there was a foundation built that I think at that point, I'm good friends with you and Mukunda, and Jeremy's living there, and you guys really ran with it. And so you've really turned it into, you've actualized the vision that was originally there. As far back as the mid 90s, late 90s.
So I joined Mass Bay in probably like 97. But I think there had been a bit of a change of guard. And so that historical, I knew Mass Bay was a good club, and it was Cycle Lodge was great. Diane, everybody was really nice on it, but that elite racer kind of coaching training,
the South Shore thing was gone.
I got there too late. The party was over. There was they flipped the lights on in the club. I'm like, oh, what's happening here? I heard there was a good time, and now it's not. And so then that's why I end up in I heard it moved to Northampton, and oddly enough, my best friend from college was moving to Northampton to go to graduate school in UMass Amherst. So that's what I was chasing. I raced on Mass Bay for a couple of years, but there was we just had fun. I was riding ride like 2 days a week, and like I'd kind of like, win a couple of races and like, kind of kick through the categories, but I didn't know there was really a whole lot more to, training than like, go out and ride as hard as you can for 20 or 30 minutes, a couple days a week, then race on the weekend every once in a while. So that was like, I felt like there should be more. I saw articles, there were photocopies, and like, I was trying to chase something,
a secret knowledge.
Never quite found, like, and that's, I think, one of like with my own racing is like, I never like at the right time, I never found a mentor or a program like JAM. And so that, that's definitely part of the drive for me is like, I wanted to do something bigger, but there wasn't the opportunity. I couldn't find the opportunity. And like, I was just maybe I should move to Colorado or something, but I didn't know what to do. I didn't know like, who was going to kind of like, really like tell me like exactly what to do in those first, probably like 97 through 2000, 2001. And
well, let me pause you there because I think this is about where we get to be friends. And one of the things I like to do is, how did we meet? I think it's a good part, a good foundation for the story, but here we're not starting with it. We're kind of, we're finding it like mid story here. So you came to Northampton, you had heard that it moved to Northampton. It literally had moved to Northampton, like we had started the Northampton Cycling Club, and we really were trying to revive what I had experienced in Mass Bay Road Club in the late 80s and early 90s. So what year did you move to Northampton?
I think fall.
And so, yeah, we can remember when I talked to like JD, Billadu, and John Fry and other people who are around, we can remember like realizing that you were in town, and we were like, what is this Mass Bay dude doing in Northampton? Like, we didn't know you, we knew of you, but we couldn't figure out why you were there. And then someone's like, yeah, well, he lives with this other dude. And we're like, oh, maybe they're a couple. They've moved to Northampton together because that's, at that time, like, it was one of the safest places you could be in. So we just thought you'd moved to Northampton with your boyfriend, and that you also raced bikes. And then how did we end up actually, though, getting to be friends?
I remember one of the first times I can remember talking to you and JD was helping set up the Palmer course. Like, we were just like stepping in stakes, and like you guys were like, what's your deal? And I was like, I'm just here to help out.
Yeah, why are you? Yeah, you were definitely a mystery to all of us because you're pretty fast. Like, you weren't bad, but you weren't a student. We didn't know what you did for work. Yeah, and then somehow, I don't know, you fell into
I worked at a candy factory at the time, which was a whole different mess.
Oh, geez, we could have a show about that. Yeah. But so ultimately, we got you involved in Northampton Cycling Club, and we became friends, and we started working on stuff together. Did I coach you?
Yeah, we did some work. I wonder, maybe like 2001 or 2002.
Yeah, that's what I think too. I was trying to think about that. I was like, wait, I coached Al for a while, and I had forgotten about that. But then at some point you became a coach, and you started coaching for us, and obviously everything changed. And I don't want I want to get ahead. I want to back up for a second because I want to talk about Maine and Bates and like where you grew up and so you were Mass Bay Road Club because you were on the South Shore.
I grew up in Situate, which is right on the shore near Plymouth. And I lived there my whole life until going to school in Lewiston, Maine at Bates. That was it's a great school. I liked it. Lewiston was, it was. And there was actually, there's a shop called Rainbow that had a really good ride. And it was just like, a bunch of older guys that were like, they were fast. And, I think it was Larry Pullen was like really like, he was fast. He'd go to Tucson and train. I think he trained with Gord, and so those guys,
the irony, let me interrupt you. The irony there, of course, is that John Grenier eventually bought Rainbow Bike and now was a client of mine it's probably my longest running client for 6 or 7 years. And now you coach
Jacob
John,
Jacob
coaches John. but he's still with Cycle Smart and owns Rainbow Bike. And it's just funny how the connections go. He's a great friend of the business. But yeah, so you're at Bates,
just biology. I was a runner and, but not like a super serious runner. And I just my sophomore year, I just started racing more, riding more. I went to LL Bean and bought a bike and shoes and everything for $700. Rode home from like Freeport to Lewiston. I was like, oh, this is all right. I'm done with running. And so it just really picked up from there. I tried to do both of them kind of at the same time, but the bike was just so much more fun. And like, it just, the amount of like, what you can see riding I think that's what really just kind of drew me in. And it was, go for a 10-mile run. That's pretty long. And it's the same 10-mile loop. You just don't very describe here. You describe a very small circle in running, and in cycling, it's like, I'm going to go, like, I might go to a different state, or, just to see some of these like places that like you'll never see any other way. So I think that
and the riding there is
no cars, decent pavement.
Lewiston maybe isn't.
You're out of town in no time.
Yeah. Sorry if anyone's listening.
That's not a whole lot different than East Hampton. Both of them have picked up a lot, and they're perfect for me.
Yeah, I mean, I spent almost 2 years in Portland. I do love Maine. I love the time up there. I'm not sure. Let's just not make fun of Lewiston. Yeah. We get sidetracked on that, but Bates is a great school. It's a great community there. I remember doing a training lecture there for John after he had bought the shop, and came up, and we had a huge turnout. Like 30, 40 people came out to hear me like do a seminar on how to train for bike racing, and that was really great. So, and so when you finished at Bates, did you go home or did you come to Northampton?
I went back to work for the summer. I worked in boatyards kind of my whole life, and so my dad runs a boatyard in Quincy. And so I finished out the summer working for him. And then I think, cause it's a pretty small, it's a pretty small operation. So I finished that summer, and then, it's like, oh, hey, I'm going to move out, I'll move out to the Valley after. And that kind of gave everybody time to find other people to help at the yard. And, so yeah, I think I finished out that summer working at the boatyard. And then moved out in the fall of '99, most likely, to Northampton. And, I have been here since then.
Yeah. So that's when we overlapped and kind of got hooked up, first as an athlete and then as a coach. And then I think John Verheul was still working for me, I think, when you came on first as a coach for us.
We lived together for some amount of time.
Right. And it's funny because this is the period where we all passed Jeremy around a little bit as a client. The business was starting to get very busy, and I didn't think I could keep up with, Jeremy wasn't getting the attention he needed from me. And I think Verheul started coaching him next. And then he went from Verheul to you.
Yeah.
Right? At some point, John.
I think Jeremy and I have always been we've been friends, and it's never been he's never been a client that I'm like, oh, I'm just coaching this guy. It's like he loves coaching, and he's one of the it's always the thing I think is so funny is that he has such amazing attention to detail and to depth of discovery in what he's interested in. And obviously training is one of those things. So we would just sit and talk about training, and, he was always looking for more and more information. And I think in an era pre-internet, you just had to work with a lot of different coaches to see what their thoughts were, what experiences they had gained over, their decades of coaching. And so, I think that's why he's a great athlete, but also he's a smart guy, that does his homework, and is, very well versed in a lot of different training philosophies. So I think that's, he was always very engaging. And so it was a good guy to learn from, to, to try to, just like bounce ideas off each other.
Yeah. And of course, like when I coached him, it was a completely different experience because he was a hyperactive 16, 17-year-old. He hadn't become that person yet. And I think I've told Jeremy this myself, but I told him years ago, but I think one of the things that's really been most impressive about Jeremy is how much growing up he did, how much maturing into a really exceptional human being he did from this, spazzy teenager that I coached, where half of coaching him was coaching his mom and managing those expectations. And it was, he grew up a lot, and he someone who started giving back to the business as opposed to someone that we were just coaching or investing in. And so now he's like, as we've talked about already, like a big cornerstone of the community. It's really great how it's all
been like, I think,
out.
It's been really interesting to see the role of, kind of intense aerobic exercise and the kind of academic performance. We definitely have a good number of hyperactive ADD athletes in the program. And when they find cycling, you very often see a really big performance and bump in their schoolwork too. And so like finding their outlet, it's often like you have these kids, like you make them sit still in school, and like you kind of teach them things about or teach them in a way that's just not engaging and kind of isn't engaging for any human being. And then if they find their passion and if they find their outlet with sport, it's amazing. Like, they're smart kids, but they're just kind of like stuck in this like program that it just doesn't work for them. And so I think that's really a great thing we've found out is like, you can be good athletes, but it also helps you, achieve academically as well. So, I think that's been really,
I mean, Anthony. Anthony is a great example of that. And like, he's an athlete that we haven't mentioned yet tonight, but Anthony Clark, I think, is a great example of a guy who, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that he turned his life around through cycling.
Not exaggeration.
No, because Anthony's such an interesting character because he's such a kind-hearted soul, and he means well and doesn't mean anyone any harm. But he genuinely needs the exercise and cycling as the outlet for the energy that he has naturally. And if he doesn't have an outlet for that energy, it can guide him. He finds himself in situations that he doesn't really want to be in. And getting him to focus again, the transformation that he's made as a person since he's come into the program is exceptional. And he really is an upstanding human being, which I think is why we all like supporting him. Like, people maybe only see his internet persona. And first of all, it's not a persona. And I don't think people understand that. Like, that's actually Anthony. It's not an act. He's not exaggerating. Even Jeremy, Jeremy knows when the camera's on, but it's still pretty much Jeremy. Anthony doesn't even really, it's not any different when the camera's on or off. But you can have those quiet moments with Anthony where you realize how observant he is and analytical he is and what a sort of deep spirit he is. And I think last year in the races, I finally just noticed, I was like, Anthony's matured and he actually looks like a professional athlete to me now. His body had changed, his patience in the races, his focus. And you are primarily responsible for all that. Like, that transformation came from, I feel like, the time that he spent with you and with the group.
There's a lot of off-bike work we do with everybody. But I know, again, Jeremy and I have spent a lot of time, we're very deeply invested in Anthony on a lot of levels. And so I think, it's hard for, him to not be, what we always look back to as like our most successful, transfer, this is why we do it. This is like,
he came from the lowest to the highest. If you had there would be a competition in the USGPs where they keep track of how many people you caught. Like, if you started in the back, how many routes you passed. symbolically speaking, Anthony's come from the back of the pack to the front and passed a lot of people along
and that's
the way.
not like we definitely. I don't have favorites, and I'm not like most proud of any one particular person. Like everybody. Yeah,
everybody's got a struggle.
It's just I think. I think Anthony's an easy one to be like, okay, that's more than just bike racing, and all of them are more than just bike racing, but I think more so in this case.
Yeah, sure. I mean, he's a single dad, like I always found that amazing. And now that I'm home taking care of a kid, it's unfathomable to me what he does. It's so exceptional. Yeah. I think you've also had particularly notable success with female athletes. And I think, that I think so CycloSmart maybe is known for being friendly toward female athletes, but I also think it's a slight shortcoming of the business that for the longest time we either didn't have a female coach or we only had one female coach. Unfortunately, we do have a female coach again now with Serena Bishop Gordon coming on, but we've really struggled to find a suitable or a female coach to come on and work for the business, when the time is right or we were actually looking. But on the other hand, I think we have the attitude that, athletes in a sense are athletes, and coaching female athletes has this dual thing of, first and foremost, they're athletes, age, gender, whatever they're all just circumstances. How many hours a week do you have available to train? What do you do for work? What are your goals? Those things are genderless. They may change, but if we treat every athlete as a unique individual, then we treat every athlete as a unique individual. But then I think but then on the other hand, you have to do this acknowledgement of the challenges that female athletes face while still trying not to make male athletes the default. We don't want to coach female athletes as, well, men are the default and here's what we're going to do different for you. But yet you still have to recognize the challenges that you face that are unique to them because they're female athletes. And so, I mean, that's my general approach. And I think that's the business sort of dogma. But you've been particularly successful in that area. I think your female athletes are very high achieving. I don't want to ask a corny question like, is there a secret to that? But what's the secret to that, Al?
No, I don't. I think it's just kind of there isn't a secret. It's it's
right.
That understanding the demands. I think that's I learned a lot, and I've definitely made a lot of mistakes. With the JAM program, it's I learned from that program. I learn a lot every year, and I think I had we've had a lot of great years, and I think I drive some people nuts, and so just understanding. I think I can't make any generalizations because there was but motivation tends to be a little different, men versus women. And, I think that's something that took me a while to figure out, and things that I could, what you use to motivate and how goal setting, kind of the way, a lot of guys will approach the sport, or you can give feedback is, and it can be constructive and motivating. It can be very, disheartening for a female athlete, and it comes off differently. So that was something I definitely, from the program, that was it was very helpful. I was okay, that was, I'll say I have and it's not I don't intend the feedback to be loaded, but for one set of athletes, it comes back to okay, he says this is what, what's going on. This is what he wants me to do. And for another set of athletes, you could say that, and it doesn't 100% run down, no, it isn't. And that's so there are in life, you do have to make, some generalizations or like data clumps, and like you're gonna like, you do have to, kind of gather data in groups, and then, you use those kind of some assumptions off like, training protocol, to start your basis with an athlete, and then you adjust, based on, okay, here are my assumptions for, the demands of this athlete, like what they have for, available like training time, and you make, your best, estimate of what's going to be appropriate training. And then you look at the feedback and you adjust to it. And no one's going to like, you don't make a perfect plan. You don't even like, there's always going to be trial and error, and there's always going to be variation even within an individual. So there's like, you have like inter-individual variation. And then, even from season to season, you see that, coaching the same athlete, if there was something that worked, doing it the next year isn't going to necessarily give you the same result. And that's, I think one of the things you really start to see change a lot is like how you metabolize substrate, and how that, how that changes as an athlete gets older, and how training programs just can change so much, and like what they have to eat changes so much as they go through, successive years of training. I don't know. So I think just being able to have, a well thought out initial plan of how to, manage an athlete, and then being, receptive to getting cues, whether it's working or not. And,
It's still, for me, it's that paradox of disregarding gender, even as you acknowledge the challenges that a female athlete faces. And you have to do that simultaneously. You have to be able to, like, I don't know, keep both of those things in mind. And they're contradictory, but you can't dismiss one or the other in the approach. It's not easy to do. But again, I think you've been very successful with it. And I think your athletes show that. I mean, that speaks for itself. There've been some changes, I think, in the program this year. Like, you've got Jack and Scott racing on the road in Belgium this summer. So tell me a little bit about, and part of why we've been able to do that, of course, is other senior associate coach Jacob Fetty works with cyclosports program, road program, which has some similarities to JAM in some ways, but it's a really great program where they're trying to develop, I think I don't know there are any women on the team. It's just male road racers right now is the focus of the program, but really a broad reach with multiple teams based in different places. But you were able to put Jack, through that association, you were able to put Jack and Scott on a trip with cyclists in Belgium. They at the chain stay?
Yep.
Staying at the chain stay? So tell me about that, and like, what is that? Does that signal a change in the approach for JAM? Like, what should we expect? What's going to be different this season with JAM from past years?
The cross season's going to be the same. I think we're always looking into, what to do from, May through July. And I think high level racing is very important. And just, camping out in Belgium and racing at Kermesse, or like a 1 day race, like when you're ready, it's just like the cost to do that. And like the amount of travel you have to do is like, once you get there, like you're not traveling anymore. Whereas in the US, it's like, you have to be on a decent team. You have to have a decent travel budget, and you have to travel a lot. So, this is definitely an experimental year. And it's, but I think like the availability of, you just ride and race. You don't really you barely even get in a car for more than 2 hours the whole time you're there. I don't even think you
can ride.
Yeah, you probably ride to most races. And so it's just,
when I was there, I rode to every race. I didn't.
I think that's, there are pros and cons to that. You're away from home, but if you're traveling and finding the good races in the US, like, you're going to be traveling just probably more, but not really having as much of a home base. So if this, I think if this proves to be helpful, and it works out, and there's every chance that the guys can come back and be like, I hated that. That was a terrible idea. You're an idiot. And I was like, okay, that's that.
Yeah. The hardest part of Belgium is living in Belgium. Yeah, as we always
say. So I don't believe that's going to be the case. I think Jacob's doing a really good job at letting the guys know that they should race when they're ready. We're not running them into the ground. I just think part of it is because there is no club system in the U.S. that you can't learn to race bikes. I think it's very hard to learn to race bikes in the U.S., and especially if you're just going to stay in New England. There there isn't that historical knowledge of of how to race a bike, to the fact that you show up to a bike race with a clean bike. There's the basics of washing a bike and how your kit's supposed to look, and how those little things are so critical and to being a good bike racer, for the safety of other people, for the culture, for the so much of the stuff that's been I feel like put in the same, sentence as the elitism of cycling, of, group rides that were didn't.
How to wear your hat.
Group rides that weren't inclusive. And part of that, lack of inclusivity was if you had a really dirty bike that was clearly no one's looked at it for months, and you were a danger to other people because you didn't hone your craft, and you weren't,
Yeah,
I think, or as we all know, cycling is really dangerous. And I think if people don't commit to, you need to commit to cycling. And it's, again, another thing where it's you need to put the work in to be accepted. And if someone doesn't take care of their bike, doesn't want to follow orders, or the protocol of a group ride, then it's oh, is that guy, is this person gonna chop my wheel or not point out something, and I end up pushing you into traffic by mistake, or and I know that's kind of extreme, but it's just, I think there is a role for the club structure and the education you got from that, having older riders telling you what to do. And I think so many people would benefit a lot to listen and learn from someone telling them, hey, this is how we're going to run this ride. And it's, especially if it's a club ride that they've taken time to organize the club, to work with the municipality to get the okay, or at least, or have to deal with the fallout if the cops are hey, what's going on with this ride? Who's responsible? It's the club that deals with it, and the club that works with the town to be okay, we'll use this road instead, and just so much the cycling has gone so much for the individual, and not understanding that it's the promoters that put the race on, the board, and the club that does all this kind of behind the scenes work to make this group ride that just kind of appears happen. I think that's a little more that kind of that culture, and the culture of being a bike racer and being put in the gutter and learning to race kermesses in Belgium. That stuff is that's the culture that I was always charmed by with cycling. And
same absolutely same. And I agree with you that it can appear elitist or come off as elitist, but I've described it before as I discovered another secret code, similar to punk, oh, there's an etiquette here. I've always been obsessed with etiquette.
Yeah.
And I think that's why, again, why we share so many similar views about how to develop the sport and what's important is you learned etiquette on club rides. And, I try not to yell at people too much in races like I used to, but if I lose my temper in a race, it's usually from someone's breaking the etiquette. There's a set of unwritten rules, and people do learn the sport in a vacuum now more so than they did before, and they don't learn the etiquette, and they show up at races, and then at that point you teach someone etiquette almost through force. There's a hazing process, which I don't. That's not the best way to learn.
I think the great thing about the NCC is we have a lot of group rides, and there are lots of introductory rides where it's a very it fosters learning, and it's not it's that great place for people to like learn the ropes and not be intimidated and not but I think especially once you start riding, like you're in an A group or a B group and you're riding fast, and like there are more consequences, and there's it's also just like annoying when people are like, oh, I'm just going to do it my way. It's like, well, why are you on a group ride? Like there is
if you ride 15 seconds in front of the ride, if you attack a group ride and ride 15 seconds in front of it, you could have just ridden by yourself,
or just like even like stuffing up, like if you have like a good like rotation going and someone just keeps on like stuffing it or like dropping the pace by 5 miles an hour, you're like, why what are we doing here? And it's I think there's
so let's bring that back around towards, I had asked you about like what can we expect from Jam. So let's taking that, that led us to those guys going to Belgium and what they were going to learn from Belgium. But can we expect, what should we look forward to in the fall? Like, so it's Jack and Scott are the elite men. Ellen will be riding with Jeremy this fall. So you have some new riders replacing who were the female. What's the roster for Jam this fall?
Scott, Jack, and then we have Reese, May, and Natalie Tapias. I'm probably saying her name wrong.
One of those last names that you've only seen written. No one has said it out loud yet.
Yeah.
Tapias.
And I think Reese and Natalie are
great.
They're racing. Natalie races on Britley's Stan's No Tubes women's team during the summer, and Reese and Natalie will be moving to East Hampton. And I think.
Oh, I didn't. Natalie is going to move as well. I didn't know that.
I think that's kind of just the. Yeah, it just. We don't have so much money that we can make up for not having a rider here by having them travel more, or it just having them local is our greatest strength. Is kind of the knowledge we can pass down, and having people ride together, and even seeing someone do their workouts, and a lot of the technical practices, that kind of stuff is you get. The response we get out of a local rider is so much greater than someone that's remote. And we've had some, Becca Farringer and Christina Birch were really, really good riders. And it was just, I think it was hard to we had all this stuff going on at here, and it's then you have someone outside the bubble. And I think it just doesn't work that well because there's it kind of makes clicks. And they're both, gone on to Becca rode for the Amy D Foundation and has shown that she's a really, really good rider.
Top level. Absolutely. She took the improvement she made in Jam Fund and continued to move on from there in the way that she graduated.
Yeah. I would have loved to have her locally, and in part of the crew that you could go and train with. I remember the first time riding with her. I was we go to do a power test, and a lot of times I'll ride with the people, and I was I think I had maybe I had the head unit on my bike, and it's the number she started doing. I was oh, I didn't calibrate this right, and I was oh God, we're actually going this fast, and then I was okay, I think I might get dropped. And that was drafting someone up, it was probably a 4 or 5% climb. And that's, I think the number she ended up doing, I had never seen before from a female athlete. And I was yeah, you're kind of,
you might be good at
you're going to be good. And she was great. She's a super smart person.
But it was hard not having her in Northampton or in East Hampton meant that you weren't able to fully integrate her and help her reach the level that you thought she was possible, because you weren't as hands-on with her as you would have you could have accelerated her improvement even further than you were able to.
I think that. I think is your point. So. And I think the same with Christina, but Christina, is she was finished.
Also successful. Mm-hmm. She's moved on to successful things. She's raced track. She's got a professorship. Her life is moving in the direction that it seems like she wanted it to, and has moved on in a successful way. So I think I'm looking forward to these changes. I think obviously you're bringing the same two riders back for the men, but it's gonna be very interesting to see with two. I mean, Reese May is a client of the business. She's someone whose success we're already invested in. But having Reese and Natalie as, brand new and new to the program, that looks like minimum 2-year project, and it'll be interesting to see.
I'm definitely looking at progress. My expectations for this year are learning the training protocols, learning kind of integrating into the community. And I think the performance is, I'd love to see performance out of it, but I think they're people that I'm going to commit to, multiple years of development. And, I think that's the same, Scott's been on the team for, a number of seasons, and, it takes us, a good 3 years with somebody, especially if they're kind of more in the earlier development phases of their careers. Hyde was absolutely the exception, but he was, and that was still almost, that was 2.5 seasons. And that he was just, but his adherence to training and diet and just doing everything right, his skill set, one of this is what you dream for in a client. He's, he works his butt off and he makes sacrifices, and, he listens and assimilates better than, I think he, as far as amount of time invested to return, he's definitely the fastest learner. The program is. Yeah.
His strength has always been in my opinion, his strength is his versatility, his flexibility. He's absolutely committed. He does the training, but just from the background that he comes from, he's a guy who's going to adapt to Belgium. Belgium's not going to phase him because he's seen worse. He's slept on worse floors. He's ridden on dirtier train cars. And so that has turned into a real strength for him because he's unflappable. He can just take anything you throw at him and be like, yeah, whatever. And be, positive, have positive energy around it, kind of be pumped, let's just do it, man. Let's get it done. It's really, it's great. I want to close out with I think this is going to be the podcast theme question that I'm going to start asking of every guest at the end of every show, which is, what is your favorite Prince song? Obviously, it's been a interesting week of everybody just going back and listening. If you don't have a Prince catalog, there's been plenty of places to listen to Prince nonstop, and I think a lot of people are thinking about, everybody is discovering that they have Prince memories, even if they weren't active fans. People are realizing how much Prince was a part of their lives. So it's very timely right now, but I also think it's going to turn into a very interesting question for every guest, because I think it will say a lot about each guest. I'm going to judge people based on what I'm not a big and Spencer's calling you out in the comments right now.
So I'm not a big music person.
Most critical question of the night. You don't have to be. So you don't have to be. But you still
it's When You Were Mine. But I think I came.
Excellent.
I came into it because Cyndi Lauper. One of her albums. The album that was on was this is one of my favorite albums. It's it is an amazing, that whole album is amazing. And then Prince's version of it, and his ability to write for her. And I don't know, I think all that, and the song itself and the lyrics, that's really definitely is, that's my,
perfect. Yeah. You didn't let me down, Al. I knew you wouldn't, and you got Spencer's approval for that answer.
Yeah.
But I think you picked an off list song. It shows a little bit of knowledge, the fact that you knew that was even a Prince song. Yeah. There are so many songs like, God, I saw that clip going around on the internet all week about 10 songs Prince wrote that you didn't know he wrote. Like, that was infuriating to me because I was like, who doesn't know that these are not Prince songs? And then I was like, oh, mainstream people, I guess. I was very judgmental about that. So, no, When You're Mine is, I have the song in my head now just from saying the title. I'm pausing because I'm listening to it in my own head. Excellent choice. Well, let's wrap it up with that. Thanks, Al. That was great. And I realized we could go for another hour, and we will definitely have you back. And so I think that was I think we covered the things that we wanted to cover. So, thanks for taking the time to be on the Myerson Line. And where will people see you next? What's your personal racing plans and travel plans? If people want to come up and shake your hand at a bike race, where will you be?
I think I'm going to go race mountain bikes this weekend. We're driving the van down to Rhode Island, going to do some mountain bike racing. There's an FDO race on Sunday. We're going to drag our ratty van down there. It's not that ratty yet.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, like, if we had another hour, we should have talked about Paris to Ancaster and all the other great stuff. So maybe we'll get to that in the future. It would be great just to talk about that event.
We're mainly local. Yeah. Mainly local in the next couple of months.
Yeah. I will be in Ellicottsville, New York, just south of Buffalo, riding with Kind Human Bicycles weekend camp, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So maybe I'll see you at Miles Standish.
Or, as Anthony calls it, Miles Sandfish.
That's not inappropriate, honestly. That's really accurate.
All right.
Awesome.
Take care.
Well, thanks a lot. Thanks for joining us. Yep, we'll talk to you.